Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, August 30th, 2017. We have not yet successfully exorcised the ghosts from the machine, I guess, and we still have that strange echo. I come through just fine, which is interesting, and I'll just have to analyze the way we've built our sound system here and see if we can't find ways to fix it. I've pressed every button there is to press at this point, but we'll keep working on it and rebuild from the ground up perhaps over the weekend and see if we can't get rid of the echo. It's a tough day to have the echo, of course, because we on Wednesdays generally do have both Greg Dworkin and Joan McCarter join us. And so, as I said in the morning post this morning, if you missed it, then the joke is still fresh. Guess what? We're the only show that brings you now twice the Greg Dworkin and twice the Joan McCarter. It's not quite. Is it an echo or is it just sort of an empty hallway sounding sort of thing? We'll try and engineer it on the fly. It's not going to work very well. And the big mystery is it doesn't come out this badly on the podcast. So I don't want to recommend anybody not listen to the show live because that's the most fun. But if for some reason it just is driving you crazy, the podcast is supposedly nice and clean sounding. And I'll talk to Tom over the weekend and see if we can't hammer out a new solution. Justice, I think, has given me every suggestion that he can think of, as have about 5 different folks behind the scenes over at Netroots Radio. It's a big mystery. And basically it probably comes down to once you've fiddled with something, it's fiddled for good, and there's no undoing it. I've added some effects to try and get rid of some of the other issues that folks have complained about in sound quality. And by the way, it's okay to complain. I say it's a loaded term, complaint, but helpful hint, suggestions, ways to improve the show would be another way of saying these things. And I accept them in good grace. I'm not doing it on purpose. I'm trying my best. And we'll get you the quality that you deserve on today's show. Okay, maybe not today's show, but you'll deserve. I'm telling you, you deserve it next week too. So just hang on and hang in there. I don't know if I switched my sessions in the middle of a live show, I have a feeling it would I have a feeling everything would blow up at that point and we wouldn't be able to continue with the live show. So it'll be, imagine that the hallway at the end of which our broadcast is coming from is the hallway of your very own home. How about that? Will that soothe you? It's happening down the hall from where you are right now. And so that's super exciting and actually a huge bonus to the show. Maybe I could get a job in the Trump organization when this is all over, and everyone would be happy to have me there as a spin doc. I'm doing better spinning, I think, than anyone Trump has ever hired. So it's a distinct possibility that there's work at the end. There's light at the end of the tunnel that we're broadcasting from. Maybe there's work there too. Greg Dworkin has sent me a raft of stories, so I know things happened between yesterday and today. Things besides Melania's shoes, which apparently, I'm not sure. We're having a big debate, a huge debate on whether the shoes are out of bounds for discussion. I don't think that they are, but I don't think they merit a whole lot of discussion. Perhaps something that would ordinarily merit more discussion, I think, is actually a huge distraction, and you ought to drop any consideration of it whatsoever. And that is, I think that there is once again, I think the army of Russia bot, Trump bot trolls are out, and I think they're succeeding in getting liberals to tear their hair out, which is, I don't know that there's any distinctive advantage to having bald liberals running around out there, but tearing their hair out and wasting their time online and elsewhere, correcting the strange and strangely widely held, it seems, misperception, misunderstanding, misinformation, propaganda, what have you, that in the wake of Trump's lackluster response to to Hurricane Harvey. They're out there whatabouting hurricanes at this point and insisting that at this point during Hurricane Katrina, of course, the president then, obviously Barack Obama, was out golfing. And I mean, I've seen this over and over again, and mostly people pointing out, look what this idiot said to me, and I had to correct him. Or 5 people have said this or that, and it's always a variation of the same thing. A defense of Trump's lackluster response, supposedly, being, look at where Barack Obama was. Or where was Barack Obama 3 days after Katrina? Oh, yeah, that's right, on the golf course. But, of course, astute listeners will know that, well, Barack Obama wasn't president during the Katrina storm. And I wondered for a moment, just for a moment, whether people had fooled themselves into thinking that Obama was the president because of the number of times that they tried to label other incidents of any kind Obama's Katrina, and it just sort of translated into Obama's Katrina. Oh, it was Obama's Katrina was, you see, and I think maybe that had something to do with it. But what I really think is happening is whether they're bots or not, they just think, and I think they seem to be correct, they think it will drive you absolutely up the wall if they keep saying it, and you'll spend all your time on Twitter trying to correct them about when Barack Obama was elected president, and they're just as happy to have you wasting your time and possibly entire life doing that and driving you crazy while doing it than to have you doing anything else. So my advice to you, I guess at some point, is shut that off. But yes, it could be real. It could be a real effect. Public policy polling got out there. You know, they love to do those issue polls, and polled self-identified Republicans and asked them whether they approved or disapproved of his response to Katrina, or whether he was even president during Katrina. And apparently about a third of Republican respondents fully believe, or are willing to tell the pollsters they fully believe, that Obama was president during Katrina. I don't know whether that's really true. I mean, I have found out recently, I looked at Wikipedia, he wasn't president during Katrina, but I don't know whether they really believe it. But to the extent that you're spending any time correcting them, don't bother. Just, you've probably already taken that advice, probably came up with it yourself. Just thought I'd throw it out there. Probably good advice with respect to Melania's shoes too, but if you're having a good time poking fun at her does anybody know the measurement of the heels? I've seen everything from 4 to 6 inch stiletto heels. Is there any quick way of identifying? I don't know. Anyway, apparently she changed on the plane into sensible sneaker type shoes. Trump himself got on the plane in Frankenstein boots. I don't know if you saw that. Very stylish. But surely there are stylish boots out there, yes? Ivanka, you got to get on that one. In the meantime, let's turn to more important matters. Greg Dworkin joins us maybe from the end of a hallway. I don't know. Let's find out. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning. How's it sound?
To me, it sounds terrific. It's as if you were on a microphone in Connecticut and everything was normal. But we'll see what it sounds like at home to our live listeners. Our podcast listeners report no problems, so that's good news.
Right. Always interesting.
Except that we can't figure it out.
One of the fun things about this Russian troll infestation with the Obama was golfing is that it also went with a tweeted picture of a black woman shopping.
Oh, yes. Oh, my
Remember
gosh.
that part?
I saw that one.
And it was while Obama was golfing, Michelle was shopping. And, of course, the funny thing is it was Condi Rice. And, but all black women look the same to them, so they can't really tell.
Yeah, ugh. It's pretty sad, but I saw that one crop up late in the game, too, and, I don't know what to tell you about that one.
Right.
Not good.
Oh, by the way, I get a report that, the sound sounds like, the echo of yesterday. So that part is not fixed live.
No.
Although it sounds much better on the podcast for those of you who can't stand listening.
Okay, now my next question. I'm going to turn on, and we're going to do this the scientific way. That is to say, I'm going to press some buttons, and we'll see what happens. If anything has changed. You sound fine, by the way. Yes, you sound fine to me, too. But I don't know. I'm not sure where this ghost lives, but we'll see if we can find out. So I've turned on one bass treble slider button that I thought might have been causing the problem, but its elimination has done nothing. So if everybody thinks it sounds better for some reason all of a sudden, great. If it's no worse, I'll just leave it.
Oh, well, how do I sound now?
It would sound like you're getting ready for the Halloween show early.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, let me give you I can get music. Okay, so, let's do the stories. Twice.
Let's do the stories. So I'm going to skip over the Russian troll stuff because I think it's kind of dumb.
All right.
But we have a pundit roundup today, and I thought it was appropriate that our pundit roundup started with some charities.
All right.
For one thing, one can look at Charity Navigator, which is a charity rating site. For those of you, it's like Consumer Reports for charities. And if you wish, you could look at Houston Charities. They have a whole page for that, and I've put the link in the pundit roundup. And at the same time, you can rate them if you want to, so you get a better sense of what they are. But I have another approach.
Okay.
I have a lot of friends in Texas from various and sundry sources, including Twitter, and asked Texans what charities they would like to do. And one of my favorite lists comes from a pediatric surgeon in Texas who is at Texas Children's, a surgeon in Houston, and posted in response to people asking, where should I go and what should I do? And the mayor of Houston has put together something called the Greater Houston Community Foundation. And there's a link to donate to that fund. And that will be distributed to groups in Houston by the mayor. So that's one easy way to do it. But some other suggestions from the surgeon: Houston Food Bank, Plant It Forward, organization providing urban farmland for refugees to grow food for themselves and to sell. And supporting refugees, I think, is always a great idea. I have some friends that do that. I think it's a wonderful thing. There's the Texas Diaper Bank, because in a crisis, you can never have enough diapers. You can never have enough diapers anyway.
Yeah, that's generally true. Texas
These
diapers
are pediatric
are like
diapers, by the way.
But, okay.
Then again,
I thought those were like
surgeon.
for adults, like Texas Toast, maybe.
Well, yeah, maybe. Who knows? Right? Houston Coalition for the Homeless, who I think is going to be inundated right at the moment. The Houston Humane Society, don't forget the pets.
Right.
Right. And then there's always hospital chaplaincy programs. So Texas Medical Center has Ben Talbot got flooded. Texas Children's can always use help there. So, and then if you live in the Houston area, think about giving blood.
Yes. Is there anywhere dry to do that?
It's starting to dry out a little bit. At least there was some sunshine yesterday. But again, call locally. Can't tell you what to do locally. Find it locally, and people will.
All right.
I think from Virginia, but if you want to do that, just contact the American Red Cross.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny. There's been a lot of complaints about the American Red Cross versus local Red Crosses.
Always those complaints,
yes.
But during a big a disaster like this, there are only a certain number of organizations that can handle a flood, if you will, of donations. No pun intended. And that being the case, it's one way to do it. But Joe McCarter points out, and this will all be in the write-up for the show afterwards, not just my links, but also Act Blue has links as well.
Okay.
So I think that that's worth doing. Speaking of that, there's some health issues that I think are important to watch for in regard to what happened in Houston with the flooding. Marin McKenna, who's a terrific health reporter, has this sweet storm here.
Okay.
And she writes, out of my experience covering Katrina and the aftermath, here's what's haunting me today. The average time between dialysis treatments.
Oh.
Houston's floods began 3 days ago. That's a normal time between treatments for somebody on dialysis. Missing treatment, getting sick. In Katrina, bus convoys of dialysis patients drove out of the city to get to places where they could continue treatment uninterrupted. These are people who were not flooded out, who still had working cars, sometimes no power, and the water in New Orleans wasn't safe. But what's lost was access to the infrastructure of public health that people with chronic illness depend on to keep living. This is not only true for dialysis patients, for diabetes, COPD, cancer, chemo, transplant care. I would throw in what the kids need their asthma inhalers.
Right.
Health requires regular appointments or prescriptions. That infrastructure is largely invisible to the healthy, but disasters dent it badly. They take out treatment clinics, they take out pharmacies, they take out medical records. They take out standing orders for renewable medicines or renewable treatments or procedures or X-rays or other things that have been scheduled in advance. You can't just stroll into a dialysis clinic in a strange city and say, I need treatment. The result, well, what are you supposed to do? Well, call your doctor. Well, what if the doctor's office got wiped out? The result is a slow-motion rolling disaster, she writes, in which people lose care and lose the proof they're entitled to the care. They get sicker. Marin adds, I'm from Houston. Looking at flood maps, I can see how far people will have to go for working pharmacies and clinics if they can get out. The year after Katrina, I was an overnight observer in Atlanta ERs, 8 nights a month for 12 months. A year later, people from New Orleans were still suffering from the after effects of losing care and continuity of care to the storm. They were very sick, mentally shattered, and must be said, mostly poor. Chronic disease leads to a condition of poor people, though cancer, chemo, and transplants can hit anybody. Natural disasters have a long tail. As much as we don't plan for stormwater and evacuation, we plan even less for maintaining care. And if you think it looks now like Harvey will be enormously expensive, just wait. Wait until the public health bill comes due.
Yeah, well, this thing, like we said, it's going to be a long tail on a rolling disaster, and you only find out how big a disaster it really is months later when the bills come due. But it's a problem on top of problem, and amazing. It reveals the complexity of normal living, normal life logistics. Destroying your normal life will reveal the underlying logistics pretty quickly. It's just, unfortunately, it happens at a time when you need it most. It's not an easy thing to do, like fixing the audio on the fly, I guess, but right. On a larger scale.
Exactly. So now there's something that I do want to point out, and this is both worth celebrating and not getting overly fixated on this.
Okay.
All right. And that is that there are incredibly brave, wonderful, generous, regular, ordinary people, the Cajun Navy and others who are down in Houston with their boats rescuing people. And you cannot say enough good things about this. I have to remind folks, it isn't just Houston. It isn't just the Cajun Navy. Back in 9/11, we had the boat lift that got people off the seawalls and piers of lower Manhattan. These are ordinary boat people on the rivers and harbors of New York who just all jumped in their boats and without major organization just showed up at lower Manhattan and got people off because you couldn't go uptown. You were stuck. And they took them to New Jersey and other places, and it was a wonderful thing. These things have happened before. They'll happen in the future. But like what we were talking about with the health infrastructure, charities and ordinary people helping out are not a substitute for what government needs to do.
Yes.
You can't just say, okay, well, let's replace it all with wonderful folks like this. That's all you need. We don't need Medicaid. We don't need health expansion. We don't need this. We don't need that. Everybody will just help out. Neighbors helping neighbors. That's the Texas way. There's more to it than that. And I think we went over that pretty clearly with the Marin McKenna tweet storm about the health infrastructure as one example. Yeah. Right? Wonderful helping neighbors are not going to restore the water system.
Well, that's definitely true. Nobody
build
has
the highway.
Right. You can shelter people, you can rescue people with boats.
You do wonderful things, not to take away from them, but it's not a substitute for what the government does.
Absolutely true. And it's been an interesting example just watching for all the people who insisted that charity or religious organizations could step in and fill the shoes of the government in almost all instances. Even the things that they're able to do, they don't always do, like, say, opening their churches as shelters. Mm-hmm. But from time to time. But nobody suggests that passing the hat in church means you can rebuild transportation infrastructure with that money.
Right. And nobody does. And again, that's not to take away the wonderful, wonderful things that people do and are doing.
Not at all.
But, it's just good to keep it in perspective.
Okay. I'll do that then.
All right. So keeping things in perspective, I would also point out that a 2-hour or was it on the SS Minnow 3-hour tour?
That's what it was supposed to be.
Of the area by Trump is not going to fix all the problems either. He stayed away from things such as giving compassion to the victims.
Yeah.
And he pointed out how large his crowd size was.
Did he know how much, or just? I know he said, "What a crowd! What a turnout!"
Well, obviously those are people who somehow or other, in the midst of this unfolding tragedy and disaster, were given the word and organized to come and meet him, because nobody knew where he was going, but they did, because they were there to meet him.
Yeah.
So don't get the idea that it was spontaneous. It wasn't.
No, I rarely think anything around him is spontaneous anymore, but unless it's a mistake.
And that was noted, and the pool reporter that was with him was noting all of that, and so this is clear. He was in it for the optics, as NBC First Read says, and I'm not sure that the optics were all that great. I know that there's always reporters. Dan Baltz was one on TV yesterday saying how well the president did because he did the optics of what he's supposed to. It's all BS. It's really got nothing to do with that his FEMA guy is doing a good job. Let's give him credit for that. And Texas seems to be doing the best they can under the circumstances, which are overwhelming. And let's give them credit for that. But no, this isn't the turning point, the pivot, and all the other stuff that these bozos in the media keep expecting Trump to do, because that's how they cover presidents. It's not. He's the same Trump he always is. He goes down there and he talks about his crowd size.
That's what he likes to do.
I personally find it infuriating, and I don't need the Russian trolls out there to get me infuriated.
No.
Trump will do it every time he opens his mouth.
Yes, he can do it all on his own. That's the one thing he can do without assistance.
Meanwhile, there is a very nice piece that I don't know that we covered the other day from Philip Bump. Trump has lost more than a fifth of his support since inauguration.
Oh.
Republicans overall have shed 11 points of support for Trump, but moderate Republicans have dropped 17 points since January. Okay. And why is that important? This is something I harp on all the time. Why are you wasting time with the Trump voters? It's not the core Trump voters. They're deplorable. I don't care about them. Trump has lost more than a fifth of his support, and a lot of attention has been paid to the core, Philip Bump writes, the fervent base of support that Trump enjoyed from the primaries to the general election. Bunch of racist yahoos as far as I'm concerned. But he won because more moderate Republicans who were iffy about him ended up voting the party line. They, like a number of independents, didn't like him, but they liked Clinton less. That's a problem because Trump has seen a big drop in support from precisely those groups. That's the moderate Republicans that have dropped 17 points since January. So, again, this is not to go over what happened during the election. There are always hold-your-nose voters. I think Comey wind up swaying those hold-your-nose voters to vote for Trump in this case. Maybe it would happen again, maybe not. Clinton wasn't beloved by them, but that's not the point. There were always hold-your-nose voters. But if Trump loses those, then that has consequences both for 2018 and 2020. And a companion piece there is the Pew Research Center poll that came out yesterday. Republicans divided in views of Trump's conduct. Democrats are broadly critical, which is to say Democrats are united and Republicans are divided.
Okay.
Okay. Most Republicans agree with Trump on issues, and few view his conduct positively. Are you going to vote on the issues, or are you going to vote on his conduct? And the answer is neither. You're going to vote on party line most of the time. But if you lose enough of them that don't, you wind up losing the election.
Well, can we have one?
We will eventually. Concerns of Trump disapprovers, his personality, his policies, his competence. Those are all important. David Brooks takes a different track in trying to look at that. He's got a column which is entitled, How Trump Kills the GOP.
All right.
And we'll skip most of it because David Brooks is usually worth skipping most of. But let's skip down to the bottom where he says, this is where the dissolution of the GOP comes in. Conservative universalists are coming to realize their party has become a vehicle for white identity and racial conflict. Yes. Like it hasn't been since the Southern strategy with Nixon. That's the part that I'm skipping over because you'll tear your hair out if you look at that and say, where were you? This faction is prior to and deeper than Trump. When you have an intra-party fight about foreign or domestic issues, you think your rivals are wrong. When you have an intra-party fight on race, you think your rivals are disgusting. Actually, I would use the plural, but that's okay.
Okay.
That's what's happening. Friendships are now ending across the right. People who supported Trump for partisan reasons now feel locked in to support him on race, and they are making themselves repellent. It may someday be possible to reduce the influence of white identity politics, but probably not while Trump is in office. And he's right about that. Trump's going to stir all this stuff up. So it's Breitbart.
Well, that's what he does. That's what he likes to do. It's his fallback position.
That's how he got elected.
Yeah.
So he's not going to stop doing it.
Right.
As long as he is in power, the GOP is a house viciously divided against itself and cannot stand. That's his conclusion.
All right. Well, that's a conclusion I can stand by. And it's probably a good time for us to play our music to let us know we're going on our way out to break. We've got about 30 seconds to wrap it up. But Brooks. Hey, we should talk a little bit, or maybe I will later on, about how much he skips over in discussing the history of the GOP and their deplorable stances on race in the past. But we'll pick that up on the other side of our first break for station identification. Coming up right now. We'll be back in a few. And welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm back. Greg Dworkin is back. It sounds like he might have moved a little closer to us from down the hallway. I think we experimented a little bit even during the break to try to make things better. But I've got some indication that we've got maybe a little bit of the hallway effect under control. It dampens things a little bit.
I'll just call in every day until you figure it out.
Right, yeah. Well, that's all you can do. I was thinking I would work on it yesterday after the show, and then it occurred to me, how do I test for results? How can I see whether I've done better on an effect that I cannot hear on my end and is not discernible on the recorded podcasts? I would have to listen to myself broadcasting live while I wasn't actually on the air ready to broadcast live. So they can't give me the stream.
You need a TARDIS for that. Actually.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things we're going to have to experiment with on the air, but that's what makes the show so exciting. Anyway, hopefully things are a little bit better. And, I think, we found some buttons that have some inexplicable effect. And as long as what works. This is why it's engineering. It's not science. I can't tell you why it happened. It's engineering. I can only tell you if it happened.
That's right.
And if we
one of the things I wanted to, before I go, because I'm going to have a relatively short, segment today.
All right.
Is remind you about Ben Jacobs and Greg Gianforte.
Okay.
Remember?
Yes.
Gianforte was assaulting Jacobs right before his primary, but Gianforte won anyway and became a congressman.
Yes. Right. Okay.
So Sahil Kapoor summarizes.
Thank you,
Sahil. 1, assault a reporter. 2, lie about it. 3, get elected. 4, avoid jail time with a promise to make amends. 5, get sworn in. 6, abandon your promise.
Okay.
Why that? Because Ben Jacobs tweets, Greg Gianforte is refusing to sit down with me. This is what I sent to his spokesman after 2 months of going back and forth. This was part of the court order.
Yeah,
but of course, Trump will probably pardon him. So
right, I figure that's it. He doesn't care much for contempt of court anyway, although I don't know whether it was a state court.
He predates Trump on that.
Right. Was it a state court or a federal court?
I don't know. I presume it was a state court, but he's a federal official.
Okay. Yes. Well, he is. All right. Well, so yeah, the deal was, he expressed all sorts of contrition for the assault and, well, that's the summary of what happened. What I understand, in somewhat more detail went on was, I guess as part of the settlement, he wouldn't have to go to jail for the assault.
But he promised an on-the-record interview, which he's refusing to do.
And apparently he says, well, I promised to sit down with you. And that could mean anything from riding the bus next to you to what he now offers, an off-the-record consultation of some sort. But, of course, I think it's pretty fair to say that a journalist would not be looking for that. It wasn't private contrition he was interested in. It was an interview. That's what he was there for the first time, and it's the only way to even come close to making him whole for having assaulted him when he asked questions for looking for an on-the-record response. And to say, well, I'll give you a response that you can't use professionally, plus skate on the jail time. I don't know. Somehow Gianforte thinks he's doing right by his agreement. We'll see whether any courts agree about that, but it tells you all you need to know about that guy.
Mm-hmm. Any case, I just thought I would bring that up for your consideration and everybody else's. It's Wednesday, so maybe Joan McCarter will be joining you later.
That's the plan.
If Joan's listening, if she calls, a minute after the hour or a minute after the half hour, you skip the break.
Oh, well, I wonder what, I can't do that. Wow, look at, so I've gotten, by the way, I've gotten reports of it being much better to, much worse. So
okay.
Everyone needs their hearing checked, I guess.
Right.
All right.
All right. Well, with that, maybe I'll just get off altogether, and then it won't be a problem.
Maybe.
This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Waldman, Kagro, in the morning. Maybe twice, depending upon how bad the echo is.
Yeah.
But I will be back tomorrow, and we'll play it with some buttons, and we'll try it again. For those of you who are having trouble with this, if you listen to the podcast, the sound is just fine.
Yeah, well, we can always try that. I know it's more exciting to listen live, but we'll try and work it out.
Yep,
okay.
Take care.
All right. Thanks. You do the same, Greg, twice even, if you like. One immediately following the other. Well, here's the story from the technical side. I moved the buttons and I pressed some other ones. At first, I got the suggestion that, maybe it's somehow Skype is feeding its sound into the mix twice, but I can't see any good reason why that might be happening, but you never know. So I checked around looking for that, and then there were some suggestions. Oh, maybe the volume on your computer needs to be turned down because it's playing out the speakers, but my speakers are off. And all of my audio comes through my headphones. I suppose there's some possibility that all of a sudden being close enough to the microphone to speak into it is also letting audio leak through my headphones and be picked up by the microphone. But it's been about, 4 or 5 years. That has never posed a problem, but you never know. And although I have noticed that loopback audio just screws with your sound system in ways that don't make any real sense. And by the way, after the show is over, for the rest of the day, if I have loopback audio turned off, I can't hear anything that has an audio component to it. So like when I see interesting tweets come and they've got little videos in them and I play the videos, you can't get audio to play for those videos, not in your headphones, not nothing, until you turn loopback audio back on and pop a few buttons there, and then it'll play in your headphones. But there's nothing you can do to make sound come out of your built-in speakers on this laptop once you've used loopback audio once. That's pretty much the end of it. Unless you go into loopback audio and change the settings and say, I want you to output sound now through the speakers, which I think you can make it work. But I don't know. It switches itself on and off kind of at will. And it's a very weird thing. And even when you quit loopback audio, it doesn't go back to the normal default settings that you have on your laptop. It lives in your system forever, apparently. But I guess for those of us trying to puzzle this out, there's nothing coming out of my speakers at all. It's all of my audio comes through my headphones. And when I got word from Scott that he thought, and he's got a very well attuned ear, he's an audio professional and video professional as well. So an audio visual professional, I think would be the terminology here. But, the part or the thing that I did that indicated to him that gave him some indication that things had improved was, despite the fact that my speakers are off, my external speakers, built-in speakers rather, on the laptop are off, I turned down the volume anyway, and that turns down the volume generally in my headphones, but does nothing to the external speakers. But that appeared to improve things for Scott. On the other hand, Serena Blaze, who tweets as Peace Arena, let us know, no, the echo is actually worse now. And then asking, maybe we need to turn off the computer speaker, but those are already off. So, all right, that's about, I don't know how much more time can we spend telling you. I don't know what's going on other than to apologize. Let's see. Yeah, and Meredith says the same thing. I think the general effect is that my audio is fine, and I will say it connects to the mix at a different point than Skype does. And, I'm just going to have to, I'll consult with Tom and with Justice over, maybe we'll try it tonight. I don't think the kids have any particular activities tonight, so maybe we'll try it tonight and see what we can do to experiment and maybe either plug the audio in at a different point on this chain we've built for ourselves or something. But Meredith says, I sound okay, but Greg and Armando, and I assume Joan will have it too, all have a metal chamber reverb effect, which could be really cool. Joan, if you play guitar or anything like that, or any sort of musical instrument, maybe you want to accompany yourself today, and it would be great for musical recording, but apparently for voice, not so much. Or if you'd like to talk like a robot, you could try that as well. That would make for a real exciting effect as well. I really apologize. And, of course, nothing has changed from the settings, really. Nothing should have changed since we spoke to Greg the first couple of times under the new system before I did my traveling. Of course, we would not have been able to discern any problems during the use of our pre-recorded shows because we weren't piping in any audio at that point. We'll puzzle it out, and we're smarter than the president on this sort of thing. We have the opportunity to change direction and right the ship on this show. It's a big ship, and it turns slowly, but, we don't have a drunk captain is basically what I'm saying here. All right. Well, while we have no echo going on, we can prepare for Joan's appearance. It will not be Joan's fault when the echo starts again, but I hope you'll bear with us. And like I said, just imagine that we're down a metal hallway in your house, and that this is our way of, through the use of audio special effects, reminding you that everything that my guests have to say is twice as important as the things I have to say. Will that work for you? I hope so. All right, let's see. We've got Gideon has asked me, have I seen this? And it is a New York Times story, and so the chances are that I have not, but it is a Charlottesville update. Let's take a look at that one. Hurt and angry, Charlottesville tries to regroup from violence. I haven't seen this, and looks important, although it's it's an older article, August 13th. Cheryl Gay Stolberg on this one. What is it in particular? Gideon, if you'd like to maybe isolate for me if there's something in particular that we ought to have looked at here, let me know. And then perhaps we can pick up on that and comment on it. Otherwise, I'll store it away and digest it perhaps off the air. There's plenty to get to today, and I, of course, want to set up for Joan's arrival. Let's see. I've lost track of how many buttons I have to hit here. Here we go. I wanted to get back to what we have in pocket. Today's other stories, things we haven't touched on for the past couple of days. Here's one that caught my eye that I think good to keep in mind in general, also from the New York Times. That's not the reason you have to keep it in mind, but the headline tells it all. Google critic ousted from think tank funded by the tech giant. That would be Google. Of course, Kenneth Vogel has this story, an intriguing one and a good reminder about the various unseen filters through which we will all be receiving our news and analysis. Always has been the case. True, but every new incident gives us a good new reminder of what we're dealing with out there. In the hours, it says, after European antitrust regulators levied a record $2.7 billion fine against Google in late June, an influential Washington think tank learned what can happen when a tech giant that shapes public policy debates with its enormous wealth is criticized. The New America Foundation, and I think many of you are probably familiar with it. I don't know how often we call their name on here, but a lot of their fellows and whatever else they call the people who work there and write there under their auspices show up in our feed on Twitter and things we read online, things we discuss on the show. The New America Foundation has received more than $21 million from Google, which is great if you're the New America Foundation, until, of course, you realize that money, as always, comes with strings. And that's probably the chief reason why we don't make a great deal of money on this show. We hate strings. God, I hate string. It tangles you up all the time, and we prefer to remain free of it. That's what listener-supported anything is supposed to be all about. Anyway, the New America Foundation has received more than $21 million from Google. Its parent company's executive chairman, Eric Schmidt, and his family's foundation since the think tank's founding in 1999. So it's been a number of years. It wasn't $21 million they got last year. Not all from Google. And then, of course, they mentioned parent company. Remember, Google sort of changed, didn't they? What was it then? They changed their structure and became Alphabet, sort of. But everybody, of course, still refers to them as Google. So maybe that has something to do with it. 1999, 2009, 2017. So it's a good, it's coming up on not quite 20 years. So $1 million a year, nothing to sneeze at, right? Anyway, that money helped establish New America as an elite voice in policy debates on the American left. But not long after one of New America's scholars posted a statement on the think tank's website praising the European Union's penalty against Google, Mr. Schmidt, who had chaired New America until 2016, communicated his displeasure with the statement to the group's president, Anne-Marie Slaughter, according to the scholar. The statement disappeared from New America's website, only to be reposted without explanation a few hours later. My guess about that explanation, oh my God, the rich guy who gives us the bulk of our funding is angry because we criticized his company. Let's get rid of that statement. And then in the few minutes that followed, a few minutes to hours that followed, the rest of the people in charge there said, oh my God, what are you kidding me? We can't just disappear this thing. At a minimum, it has to come back, or there has to be a statement saying that it was deleted from the website and why. We have to be honest. We have to be transparent about it. And then they thought probably less embarrassing to just put the thing back and explain to the people angry with us that we don't just disappear stuff in this country, or at least in the, the left-leaning side of this country. We try not to do that sort of thing. More embarrassing to live with that than it is to put up a notice that says, yeah, we knuckled under for money. So I don't know. That's just my guess. And I'm sure that the debate was considerably more nuanced when they had it, not only because, of course, they knew what they were talking about and I don't, but because that's their stock in trade over there. They debate those things with nuance. Anyway, the statement disappeared, came back without any explanation, but word of Mr. Schmidt's displeasure rippled through New America, which employs more than 200 people, including dozens of researchers, writers, and scholars, most of whom work in sleek Washington offices where the main conference room is called the Eric Schmidt Ideas Lab, which, maybe isn't a terrific idea, but okay. The episode left some people concerned that Google intended to discontinue funding, while others worried that the think tank could truly be whether the think tank could truly be independent if it had to worry about offending its donors. And obviously the answer to that is no, it can't, but that might not necessarily be what's going on in every single case, but okay. Surely that's in the back of everyone's mind anyway, whether Google does this or not. But this brings it to the fore. Those worries seemed to be substantiated a couple of days later when Ms. Slaughter summoned the scholar who wrote the critical statement, Barry Lynn, to her office, which is called the Eric Schmidt, whoop-ass lab. I don't know why they decided to call her office that. They did not. However, she did call him to his office. Let's see. Barry Lynn ran a New America initiative called Open Markets that has led a growing chorus of liberal criticism on the market dominance of telecom and tech giants, including Google, which is now part of a larger corporate entity known as Alphabet, for which Mr. Schmidt serves as executive chairman. Ms. Slaughter told Mr. Lynn that the time has come for open markets in New America to part ways, according to an email from Ms. Slaughter to Mr. Lynn. The email suggested that the entire open markets team, nearly 10 full-time employees and unpaid fellows, would be exiled from New America. Or I'm sure, as they tried to put it, maybe spun off as a separate entity, which would no doubt face very little difficulty in finding its own sources of funding in the future, but still, not a good feeling, I'm sure, and not a really great way of living up to what was once purportedly the Google credo, don't be evil, but maybe they don't think that. I'm sure they don't think they're being evil anyway. Plus, Alphabet has its own credo and it's do whatever the F you want, probably. But we're a long way from the don't be evil days, of course, since they got into the business of manufacturing military robots, would be about where I would put the breaking off point. Anyway, while she asserted in the email, which was reviewed by the New York Times, that the decision was, quote, in no way based on the content of your work, Ms. Slaughter accused Mr. Lynn of imperiling the institution as a whole. Yikes. Mr. Lynn, in an interview, charged that Ms. Slaughter caved to pressure from Mr. Schmidt and Google, and in doing so, set the desires of a donor, over the think tank's intellectual integrity. Google is very aggressive in throwing its money around Washington and Brussels and then pulling the strings, Mr. Lynn said. People are so afraid of Google now, and really even before they were throwing money around in that way, people should have been afraid of Google a long time ago based on what Google actually does all by itself without any influence on think tanks or anything like it. It's pretty amazing that they don't want to have some sort of independent external checks on them, raising flags about potential conflicts of interest or potential, I don't know what to say exactly, ways in which they might stray from their moral mission, if they still consider themselves to have one. And maybe they don't. But you get to be an entity the size and strength of Google, and a good person, a moral person, would probably worry that things could spin out of control unintentionally in ways that would be very bad for society as a whole, no matter what society it is. And I don't know. To me, a little constructive criticism from the outside probably seems like a good thing, especially if you're, already a multi-billion-dollar business, and a little bit of criticism really from the New America Foundation. What harm is it really going to do you? They may have overstepped their bounds on this one. Anyway, they can do that. And apparently, it's not a hard thing to do if money is at stake. Google rejected any suggestion that it played a role in New America's split with open markets. Riva Sciuto, a Google spokeswoman, pointed out that the company supports a wide range of think tanks and other nonprofits focused on information access and internet regulation. We don't agree with every group 100% of the time, and while we sometimes respectfully disagree, we respect each group's independence, personnel decisions, and policy perspectives. That sounds like, well, it might be a pretty obvious spin, if not lie. But okay, Google is not unlike any other corporate entity in that sense. New America's Executive Vice President, Tyra Mariani, said it was, quote, a mutual decision for Barry to spin out his open markets program, and that the move was not in any way influenced by Google or Mr. Schmidt. Why do you even try? Oh well. New America financial supporters have no influence or control over the research, design, methodology, analysis, or findings of New America research projects, nor do they have influence or control over the content of educational programs and communications efforts, said Ms. Mariani. She added that Mr. Lin's statement praising the European Union's sanctions against Google had been temporarily removed from the New America's website because of, quote, an unintentional internal issue, unquote, unrelated to Google or Mr. Schmidt. And what a wild coincidence that would be. Ms. Mariani and Ms. Sciuto said Google is continuing to fund New America, just so long as, I guess, Lin and Open Markets isn't there. I mean, that's true as far as it goes, right? They also, I mean, I guess you could get away with saying that New America financial supporters have no influence or control over all of that stuff, just so long as Open Markets and Barry Lin aren't part of it. If they are, then we have lots of control over it. But now that they're not, we have none, or we claim to have none. It's difficult to overstate Mr. Lin's influence in raising concerns about the market dominance of Google, as well as of other tech companies such as Amazon and Facebook. His Open Markets initiative organized a 2016 conference at which a range of influential figures, including Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, warned of damaging effects from market consolidation in tech. I think they're all pretty obvious to most of us. Not to diminish what Senator Warren is saying, but rather to, that just highlights the importance of her bringing it up. We probably all intuitively know that there's something dangerous and damaging about market consolidation in almost everything, but in tech in particular. And the more we talk about it, the more people who don't normally care to discuss such things might pick up on the same issues. So anyway, in the run-up to that conference, Ms. Slaughter and New America's lead fundraiser in emails, I've lost the train of this here. In the run-up to that conference, Ms. Slaughter and New America's lead fundraiser in emails to Mr. Lin, there we are, indicated that Google was concerned that its positions were not going to be represented and that it was not given advance notice of the event. And if there's anything, any complaint with which Google really has serious concerns behind it, obviously it would be, it's very difficult as a company like Google to get your perspective heard. That would, of course, be an obvious lie. Nothing could possibly be simpler. Google has every day, every moment of every day, every opportunity in the world to basically intervene in every conversation taking place across the globe. It doesn't avail itself of every opportunity, but the idea that their positions aren't going to be represented, I mean, that may be true as far as this particular conference goes, but then again, so what? Who cares? One, you'll survive just fine, and two, your views can be presented elsewhere. They don't have to be presented at every single conference. And thirdly, I guess I would say, I'll bet you anything that views that comport with yours will, in fact, be expressed at the conference. I'll continue on and just try and get through the article with a minimal further comment, I think. We are in the process of trying to expand our relationship with Google on some absolutely key points, Ms. Slaughter wrote in an email to Mr. Lin, urging him to just think about how you are imperiling funding for others. And that is a serious concern. Mr. Lin is now in the process of starting a standalone nonprofit with the same team to continue Open Markets work. The new group, which does not yet have a name, has funding commitments. By the way, can I suggest one? Screw Google. see if that one works for you. Has funding commitments, though clearly it's not expecting any money from Google. It has launched a website called Citizens Against Monopoly that accuses Google of trying to censor journalists and researchers who fight dangerous monopolies. The website vows, we are going to make sure Google doesn't get away with this. Well, I don't know. Maybe the single-minded focus won't help you that much, but who am I to say? After initially eschewing Washington public policy debates, which were seen in Silicon Valley as pay-to-play politics, Google has developed an influence operation that is arguably more muscular and sophisticated than that of any other American company. It spends $9.5 million on lobbying through the first half of this year, more than any other company, almost any other company anyway. It helped organize conferences at which key regulators overseeing investigations into the company were presented with pro-Google arguments, sometimes without disclosure of Google's role. And that's just not really the way you want to approach such things. It's unwise, generally, to do things that way. I'll warn myself with some outro music here. And, we'll return with more on this and try and wrap up the article here before we welcome not one but two Joan McCarters to the program, apparently, after our second station identification break for the top of the hour right after this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show right here on Netroots Radio. We've got our top of the hour break out of the way, and this will be the hour in which we take a stab at having as many Joan McCarters as we can possibly have on the show. Warning once again, I'm sorry about the echo, but let's see. And I also had to give warning to Joan about the fact that we even take breaks. I don't think we've even had her around for one of our breaks. Things were so crazy the last couple of Wednesdays when we've been on travel, etc. When we last left you, though, we were wrapping up the article about the Google critic ousted from the New America Foundation and his efforts to start his own spin-off operation, his own spin-off think tank, retaining the, at least the open markets focus here, but with a dash of Google hatred added in for good measure. Let's see. Where were we here? I skimmed down. I jumped down to see whether we might distill this down to something even smaller, but I think not. We'll have to just rejoin our article. I mentioned to you that they had spent $9.5 million lobbying through the first half of the year, Google becoming rather major Washington player then. Among the most effective, if little examined, tools in Google's public policy toolbox has been its funding of nonprofit groups from across the political spectrum, both sides, if you will. This year it has donated to 170 such groups, according to Google's voluntary disclosures on Google's website. While Google does not indicate how much cash was donated, the number of beneficiaries has grown exponentially since it started disclosing its donations in 2010, when it gave to 45 groups. And by the way, I would imagine that when they decided to give to so many groups across such a broad spectrum, it was to shield them from accusations of trying to use their money to gain political influence. And so it's more than a little troubling that they have, at this point, begun trying to use their money to gain political influence. But Google being Google, there is not a great deal that anyone is in a position to do about it except point it out when it happens. So that's what we're doing. Some tech lobbyists, think tank officials, and scholars argue that the efforts help explain why Google has mostly avoided damaging regulatory and enforcement decisions in the United States of the sort levied by the European Union in late June. Why aren't they spending their money lobbying them? I don't know. Maybe they are and it just doesn't work. But Google's Washington alliances could be tested in the coming months. Google emerged as a flashpoint in the latest skirmish of the culture wars, this month after one of its male engineers posted a critique of the company's efforts to diversify, and its data collection continues fueling questions about its commitment to privacy. Then there are mounting concerns about the market dominance of Google, which handles an overwhelming majority of all internet searches globally and dominates internet advertising. Its alleged tilting of search results to favor its services over those offered by competitors led the European Union to levy its $2.7 billion antitrust penalty in June. And I think most Americans would probably agree that on the surface, at least, it sounds like a good idea to discourage, whenever you can, the use of dominance in technology like this to tilt results, search results, which everyone hopes, anyway, will be relatively neutral, but to tilt them in favor of services being offered by Google versus those of their competitors. I can tell you this, if they're worried about over regulation that would tamp down on this business model in the Trump administration, I guess if I were consulting with or lobbying for Google, I would say this is a business model that Donald Trump could either love, and I mean really deeply love, or hate, and I mean really deeply hate. And the difference between the two is, does Trump get cut in on the dough? And so if you're looking for ways to stay out of regulatory trouble under the Trump administration, I'd say the answer is very simple. Give Trump products and Trump promoted businesses, Trump related businesses, a little extra boost in the searching. I mean, I don't want to suggest this because it would obviously be horrible, but believe me, I'm not the first one to suggest it. I'm not even the first one outside of the Trump organization to have suggested it. And if the Trump organization isn't suggesting it right now to Google, I'd be very surprised. Google people are pretty smart, and they're probably already hinting about ways to do that if they find themselves in regulatory trouble with the Trump administration. But the Trump administration is unlikely to bring that sort of thing down on Google. Usually their own policy preferences would be for anti-regulatory, to have an anti-regulatory bent. But, on the other hand, Donald Trump is pretty sly about these things. One of the very few things about which he's really actually sly is finding ways to stuff money in his pockets. He's terrible at keeping it in his pockets, but stuffing it in there initially, he's very creative about that. And so all it would take would be for someone like, say, a Steve Bannon, who I believe obviously still has tremendous amounts of influence, although he is increasingly taking on positions politically that might antagonize the Trump administration or the team Trump. But maybe Stephen Miller can still come up with this. But if someone were to suggest to Donald Trump that Google was biased against conservatives and Trump in particular, and for instance, use Google, you could convince Donald Trump by saying, look how biased this is. I'm going to Google Trump sucks, or Trump is the effing worst president in history. I'm going to search it on Google, and look at all the hits that come up for that. I mean, come on, they can't do something about that. Obviously, I'd be gaming the system to do that. But Trump won't know the difference, and he'll say this is an outrage, and he'll, what do you think we should do about it? Well, I think we should crack down. We should use the Commerce Department or something to crack down on Google or to threaten. Really? But do you think that's good for the economy to just threaten? Well, it's a blackmail play. We're going to threaten to come down on them unless something, we'll figure out, we'll talk to the lawyers, or maybe we'll just have Stephen Miller guess, as if he were a lawyer, how far can we go with this before we get ourselves in trouble? And we'll lightly hint to Google that they could get out of this if Trump coverage were better. Because Trump is is that legal? Can we do that? Look, Trump is the president, and the president is the most patriotic guy in the world, and so to be anti-president is to be anti-patriotic and anti-American, and we'll just explain it that way, and we'll put it gently to Google, like we'll murder all of you, or imprison all of you, or take all of your money, unless when you search Trump sucks on Google, the answer comes up, no, he doesn't, and here's 10,000 reasons why, and as a matter of fact, we just reported you to the police. Could we get that done? We can? Oh, well then how about not regulating Google or raising their taxes after all? And that would be a relatively simple solution, and one that would appeal to Donald Trump and might even appeal to the good folks at Google, who are, after all, not evil. And by the way, in case you hadn't noticed, they don't fund this show in any way, shape, or form. And if they did, I would tell you how fantastic they are. I don't think we're in any danger of that ever happening, or of my keeping any Google funding for very long, if that were to come about. But would we spend their big paycheck on a month's worth of groceries and then willingly lose it by saying how evil they are? We might try that. Depends what's on sale that week. Anyway, we'll wrap things up as I keep promising to do. The open markets statement that drew Mr. Schmidt's ire praised the fine from the European Union, the one that was levied when it looked like they were boosting the results of Google-owned or Google-related services versus those of their competitors. Mr. Schmidt praised the fine, and that doesn't sound like a bad idea. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Schmidt is the Google guy. It was, I can't even remember the guy's name now who wrote the piece that was so critical. Anyway, you know what? Let me add Joan to the mix here for just a second while we wrap things up, and I'll give you the gist of the end of the article. The open market statement that drew Mr. Schmidt's ire praised the fine and called on the United States regulators to more aggressively enforce antitrust rules against Google, Amazon, and other dominant platform monopolists. Last month, Democratic congressional leaders rolled out a policy platform that included a pledge to dismantle monopolies, including in cable and internet service, which some read as a direct challenge to Google in particular. That sentiment, which appears to have some support from populist elements of President Trump's base, diverges sharply from the approach that has been taken by most Democrats until recently. And by the way, the approach taken by Donald Trump until recently. Google's willingness to spread cash around think tanks and advocacy groups focused on internet and telecom policy has effectively muted, if not silenced, criticism of the company over the past several years, said Mark Rotenberg, president of the Electronic Privacy Information Center. His group, which does not accept any corporate funding, has played a leading role in calling out Google and other tech companies for alleged privacy violations. But Mr. Rotenberg said it's become increasingly difficult to find partners in that effort as more groups have accepted Google funding. And finally, there are simply fewer groups that are available to speak up about Google's activities that threaten online privacy. The groups that should be speaking up aren't. And by way of segue, I will say this. That's dangerous enough all by itself, and just a little bit more dangerous if, say, you're, I don't know, fighting the rise of fascism in America and globally, just to make you a little bit more worried about these things. So now that we have you properly scared to death, we have possibly two Joan McCarters on the line. Good morning, Joan. How are you doing?
Good morning, Kagro. I'm fine.
Okay.
I hope I'm not multiples.
There's certainly nothing you can do about it at this point. I'm sure it's all on our end and we'll work it out, but better to have two than none, I say. It's been a long time since we spoke with you.
It has. What a lead in.
Yeah, the world is imperiled, and Google is helping do it. And after I finish this, I'm going to go right back to using Google because I don't know what else to do. I have the other alternatives, and I do have DuckDuckGo available. But by the way, are they sort of essentially powered by the Google search engine paradigm? They just don't track us very much, or do you know about the structure of DuckDuckGo? I'm going to put you on the spot. It's not your place. But I don't.
No, I have been recommending it, so I should know. What I do know is that they don't track you, and I believe that they are not evil.
Okay, that's two giant steps in the right direction.
The folks at Electronic Frontiers Foundation recommend them.
Okay.
And I trust EFF folks.
Yeah, well, this is a large overarching problem, I guess, but we'll see what we can do to deal with it one step at a time, I guess.
There's a workaround that uses Google, the sort of, you're using Google, but if you put ! Google and then your search in the DuckDuckGo search field, you get Google results without having actually tell Google that you're doing this search.
Okay. All right. Well, that'll solve some of the problems. But yeah, the bigger problems, I think, are the ones all of us probably originally imagined, which was giving one company a virtual monopoly over what defines information that's available on the internet, essentially. Most of us we have a problem. I need to know the answer to X question, or who is supposed to be the person I contact about this thing, or what really happened here versus what I read in a newspaper. We turn to Google, and it's shorthand. You say, go Google that. Google is your friend. We keep telling people. What if Google isn't your friend?
I don't think Google is our friend.
No, we ought to get away from that, certainly. So, I'll put that on the for future consideration pile, along with stop calling them gun accidents, refer to them only as negligence, and stop saying Google is your friend. Okay, well, I don't know if I'm going to ever come around on the gun part, but I might be able to be convinced that Google's not particularly friendly at this point. And probably the, multi-trillion-dollar valuation was a good enough hint all by itself. You wait to see how they use their money and their influence, I guess, if you want to both sides it. But very often, trillion-dollar valuation is all you need to hear.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, something, net neutrality. You know how it goes.
After this many years, yes.
Yeah. Oh well. Okay. We're back with you after a couple of weeks. It's not. We're not out of August yet. Congress due back first week of September. We're beginning to see previews
next week.
Okay. So So we're beginning to now see previews and discussion in the papers and on the front pages of Daily Kos of what disasters await us, and there are many, and we've been forewarned of all of them. But what's on your radar after all of this time? And so much has happened since we last spoke.
It's been an eventful month.
Yes.
So much for a quiet August.
Right.
We still come back to September with all of the huge stuff facing Congress that was facing it before they left on recess.
Yes.
We have to raise the debt ceiling. They.
Yeah.
The debt ceiling has to be raised. Government has to be funded. They have to continue their fight with Donald Trump, apparently.
Yeah.
To keep government open.
Yeah. He's got in his head somehow that if he threatens to veto everything unless there's wall funding, that everyone will say, "Oh no, please reopen the government. We'll pay for the wall, and we'll carry the burden until Mexico decides to pay us back," or something like that. But why he thinks I don't know why he thinks this is magical thinking as far as I'm concerned. Mexico will pay eventually if we just close our government for a while. How would that? That will just make it terrible for us and something to laugh at for Mexico. But
I don't recommend trying to figure out how he thinks.
No, I suppose that's a fruitless endeavor. But yeah, so I guess the basic mechanism was he was going to say, "I'm so insistent that the wall be funded, even though we weren't supposed to fund the wall, that I would." He threatens to veto any spending, any continuing resolution to keep the government open, and who knows how many prospective appropriations bills, unless one, or who knows how many, all of them, depending on how many bills they put together, or if there's one omnibus bill, unless there's funding for the wall, which we weren't supposed to have to pay for, unless we front the money for, as he says, for Mexico, then We're not doing anything. Okay. So, is there any interest in that position among the people who do the voting in Congress?
There is none.
Oh.
And
all right.
On top of that, now we have Harvey.
Yes. Hi,
Harvey. We have, what already had to happen was reauthorization of the National Flood Insurance Program.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, that has to be done by the end of September. As well as Children's Health Insurance Program.
Yes.
Harvey could make all of this much, much easier. If it's put in the continuing resolution, if the emergency aid for Harvey is put in the continuing resolution, it's going to be harder, one would assume, for Trump to veto. But you're going to have the problem of the Freedom Caucus, who already doesn't believe in disaster relief or children's health insurance or anything else, fighting that. So it could make things easier. It could also even further complicate things, particularly if the Freedom Caucus feels emboldened by Trump.
Yeah. And I was going to say it's hard to believe that anybody would feel emboldened by Trump unless you're Nazis at this point. But one, the Freedom Caucus might be Nazis. Not sure.
They might be.
And
they're
two,
also not very bright.
Yeah, there's that problem too. Like, you mean the logical position? Well, they don't take those. What's the Texas contingent? What size is the Texas contingent in the Freedom Caucus? I hear mostly about Freedom Caucus members from, mostly the leadership is from elsewhere, but Texas feels like the sort of place that would have a lot of Freedom Caucus folks in it, but I'm not certain that it is.
They do.
It seems to reason.
But, that gang might say, okay, give us our money for Texas, but you can't attach anything else to it.
A clean Harvey relief bill.
Yes.
Instead of a continuing resolution. Okay.
Which seems like a pretty likely demand.
Yeah. And it's not a bad one. You would have a good cover for doing something like that. And certainly people have asked for things like that in the past. And it would be difficult to argue that there ought not to be a clean Harvey relief bill by itself. But that would be for a normal presidency, which you could count on.
It would be for a normal presidency, and it would be for a time where there isn't 10 billion other things that absolutely have to be done right now.
I guess that's true too, just the timing factor.
Yeah. They're going to be in for something like 13 days in September.
Oh, right.
Which isn't a lot to get as much done as has to be done.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I mean, all of the appropriations work that has to be done, although they could take the easiest way out and do a continuing resolution, but those always engender a fight and they always move relatively slowly, but they'd have to do it, plus a number of other reauthorizations, plus a clean bill in 13 days. That is a tall order.
It's a very tall order. And on top of that, you've got a president who's waging war against them.
Yeah, not good.
Not good at all. Not good at all.
All right. Well, I guess it's pretty clear there's a CR of some sort in our future, and it's not unusual even under normal circumstances, and again, these are not normal circumstances, to see the Congress come back, face a deadline like that, have 13 days to do it, and the solution is essentially, we'll continue the funding of everything we have right now for another 2 weeks, and then come back, and it might be that there are enough votes to say, all right, I can live with less than clean Harvey relief so long as the relief begins for 2 weeks, and then we'll come back and have this fight again. But we've been through that dance a number of times, and I'm happy to do it that way.
They've already all agreed that continuing resolution is how this is going to happen. It's just how long is this one going to last?
Yeah.
Do they try to force another big deadline and say, it ends on December 24th?
Yeah.
Or do they say 2 weeks?
Right. They could go either way on this, but yeah, I mean, the Harvey relief is going to have to be an ongoing thing. I mean, we have no idea how long this is going to take. So short term just basically means you're going to have this vote over and over and over again. How uncomfortable a vote is it for you? It's entirely possible that Freedom Caucus people are upset with having to do things this way, but they know that there's no getting around voting for Harvey relief. And if they just have to be hypocritical about it 5 times between now and Christmas or just once, I think they'll go with the just once.
I would think so.
Yeah, but they typically like to keep a really short lease on those CRs, so that would be a real change of direction for them. And I guess no surprise. Hey, your state got bashed. You have a totally different approach to funding now, don't you? That is interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah, well, I've enjoyed watching people properly bash Ted Cruz and John Cornyn and everybody else, and what's his name? Farenthold, the congressman, not the
right, who keeps popping up on our TV.
Yeah, all of whom and many others who voted every time against Sandy aid, now of course wanting proactive Harvey aid. But yeah, all right. Well, they don't seem to be embarrassed by it, and Ted Cruz, I guess, has spent the last couple of days just basically lying about the position he took at the time. And he's satisfied with that.
There was so much pork in that bill. There was so much pork.
And, yeah, it's going to be in this one, too.
Yeah, it is.
The same stuff, anyway. Whether you choose to believe it's pork or not, that's the way these things go. That's how government gets done. There's a lot of people in this country, and they live in a lot of places. Sorry, Ted. It's not just about you and your soup.
We have breaking news tweeted by Marcos.
Oh.
The Daily Kos community has raised $350,000 so far for Texas charities.
Ah, all right.
Yes.
Well, good. And an ongoing activity, I'm sure. He includes, I see the tweet now. Yeah, he's got a link in there to Act Blue account.
And we're just, the DK Harvey that's at the end of that, that's just indicating that it's the Daily Kos community. We're not raising any funds off of it for ourselves.
Ah, so that just tags
so everybody knows this is just for these local Texas charities. It's just a nice way for us to see how effective the Daily Kos community is.
Yeah, okay.
And so we know it's hugely effective.
Right. So it doesn't stop in our bank account at any point. It's just a tag for Act Blue that
to know where it's coming from. Yeah.
Okay. So we can be like Trump and brag about it. Although we'll have something to brag about. Look, we gave you our money. We have something to brag about. Trump gives you nothing.
Much more generous than Trump so far.
Oh, absolutely. Though he'll brag about it nonetheless. But he's going to brag about giving Texas more of your money through tax system and then rail about taxes and how it sucks. But this is actually your money. So yeah, there's a goal up there. There's a thermometer and everything to reach $500,000, and we're already well on the way there. It looks like 3/4 of the way plus, and lots of big. I'm looking at the page now. Big list of the various charities to which or where the money lands, essentially, and you can choose the ones you want to fund through our pooling, our what do they used to call this, bundling, essentially, and you could
right. Or you can choose individually, or you can just put in an amount and it'll figure it out and split it between all of these groups.
Yeah, and it looks like there's about I don't know, what did you say, 15, 20 of them there. I'll count them up, but a lot of the ones that Greg mentioned earlier in the program, all covered here. You can take a look. So follow Marcos's tweet. We'll include that in our write-up, of course. And now, Joan, it's almost time for you to experience our first station identification break.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, I know. It's really interesting and exciting to do this sort of thing. So I'll tutor you on it and get you through it. And in about 10 seconds, we'll start playing that cue music that says we've got 30 seconds to get the hell out of Dodge and stand aside and give us an opportunity to plan our last segment. That's the good news of these things. And here comes that exciting music. Wow, that's dramatic, isn't it?
It is.
Okay, is this your first experience with our station ID breaks? I think so, right?
Yes.
Okay, so appropriately dramatic music. Everyone, we will be back with Joan McCarter, our senior political editor at Daily Kos. After this, our very last station identification break for the day. Stay tuned and we'll be back in 2 minutes. See you then. I think we were a little bit late with our music on that one, but we are back. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show on Netroots Radio. We're here with Joan McCarter, just as we were when we began our break. Nobody moved, but we talked about super secret sensitive information like how to get rid of this damn echo, and weren't able to figure it out. But I'm sure Congress can fix it.
I actually did move.
I didn't.
Oh.
All right, well, it's all lies, ladies and gentlemen. At bottom, there's nothing we can do about it. It happens on both sides. Basically, you're a Nazi, is what I'm saying.
Many sides.
Yes,
many sides.
Right, because there's lots of them.
All the sides.
All right. Okay, so let's see. When we left for the break, we had just discussed that there's almost certainly a continuing resolution in our future. Lots to take care of in September and no real capacity to get it done. And every indication that Donald Trump will throw a tantrum over the wall, of all things. But that's probably not all, I would guess.
I'm sure it's not all, but the wall's going to be big.
Yes.
Well, one of the things I wrote about yesterday was his fixation on his wall. How many cuts his budget makes to emergency preparedness, to FEMA, in order to get more border agents and build his wall.
Yeah.
Just another way of terrorizing brown people.
Great. Yeah, not surprising, although usually the president's budget, no matter who's president, sort of collapses into whatever Congress decides later on, but the Congress is...
It shows his priorities.
Yeah.
And his priorities are awful.
Yeah.
His priorities are horribly racist. His priorities are really, really not the nation's priorities.
No. And unfortunately, we're also stuck with a pretty heavily gerrymandered Congress, which would disguise that anyway, even if it was a normal, racist at the normal level for Republicans, kind of guy. But, not much hope. And it never helps to start from such a horrible standpoint, because even by pulling back from his suggestions, there's lots of room for ruin and racism, even for the so-called moderates in Congress, moderate Republicans, of which there are none, to still play with and still look like they're moderating from Trump's position. It's not hard to distinguish yourself from Trump, even if you're an ultra-conservative. Or in fact,
not hard.
If you are one, and they constantly trying to differentiate themselves anyway, and as soon as he screws something up horribly, they'll eventually just say, well, that guy wasn't a conservative anyway. And there are already Republicans saying that.
Yeah.
Let's see. So one of the things, I'm looking down the list of your latest stories. Of course, big story on the transgender military ban.
Story that was incorrectly hyped, I think, as Mattis defying Trump.
Ah, okay. Yes, I did hear that hype.
He did not.
Okay, important clarification. Bring us up to date.
He essentially is implementing the ban as in Trump's eventual order, not the tweeted one, but the real one, that is essentially freezing the policy where it is now. He's not kicking anybody out.
Okay.
But they're also not going to be accepting more until another study happens. We've already had a study, by the way. The Rand Corporation found last year that it wasn't horribly expensive to cover the few to several thousand transgender troops that are in the military, and they're doing nothing to affect readiness of the troops. Basically, there's no problem there. But there now has to be another study, and pending that study, Mattis is essentially just freezing things as they are now.
Okay.
So he's sort of implementing what eventually became the actual order, because the actual order says, okay, freeze it now, do the study, we'll see what happens.
Okay. I see. It was, I mean, it would have been great and all. And our thirst for a story like that, I guess, is understandable. But It would have been a tremendous...
And I think that's why so many of the allies did report it that way.
Yeah.
We want Mattis defying Trump. We want the generals to step up and stop the insanity.
Yeah, that would be a helpful theme, especially in the North Korea saber rattling category as well. It gives you hope, for instance, that you might not
now
just
on that
shoot
side
people.
they might just do it.
Yeah, that's their usual stock in trade. They do use their weapons, but they haven't yet had cause to use their nuclear weapons. We just don't know what kind of generals these are. But the narrative of somebody stepping in and saying, yeah, you can't just do this stuff and we're going to block you from doing it, very attractive, but I guess it didn't really reflect what was going on. And that's too bad.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes?
There's a wood chipper going right outside my window.
2 of them, probably, for those of you listening at home. Is that okay? I didn't hear much, although it did sound like there was a chair shifting or something. Was that the buzz of the wood chipper?
I think so. I tried moving rooms to see if that helps a little.
Okay, well, so far so good. It's not nearly as loud and obvious as it probably was to you. So, all right,
it's very loud. It's right across the street.
Well, wood's got to get chipped, Joan.
Yes.
Can't stop the economy, I guess. So, all right. So not quite as dramatic a story on the transgender military ban as first thought.
As we had hoped, as we wanted, and as was first reported.
Yeah. I am still, I guess at bottom all this is obviously is just sort of a culture war issue. And, the idea, does anybody really buy into the idea that they were worried about the costs of treating transgender military personnel?
No, but the Pentagon feels like they have to have an actual reason for doing something like this.
When are we kicking out
particularly
everybody
since it's
with
changing
cancer?
Policy that they've implemented.
Yeah. There's no policy about kicking out troops with cancer, as far as I know, right?
As far as we know.
Yeah, okay. Because we're probably spending a lot more on that at the moment. And that's clearly not going to happen, but I guess I shouldn't suggest anything, because you never know. Donald Trump may decide, I prefer soldiers without cancer, okay? And that's it. I'm just going to get rid of them. But it's obviously not the cost, and even though it would fit right in with at least with congressional Republican rhetoric on health care. It's what are we supposed to do? Soldiers made bad choices and now they have cancer. That doesn't mean we have to keep them into service.
Well, that's sort of their argument for not having insurance for everybody.
Right.
For Obamacare repeal.
Right. And here we are paying for socialized medicine for people. Yeah, I'm sure that, if it came right down to it, if they needed it for whatever reason, you can be sure they would roll that campaign out. That there are millions and millions of probably immigrants and people of color lining up at recruiting offices because they have cancer and can't afford insurance. They're joining the military to get treated.
To get the health care.
Yeah. And apparently our military has nothing to say about, well, I don't know, you're terminally ill. Come on in. So. I'm sure they would just make that up in an instant if it were necessary. And I'll just lay that marker down now, and probably by June of next year, Trump will have said that. And then we'll find a tweet about him saying something about it in 2009 too. That's the scariest thing.
It's uncanny.
It really is.
Everything there's a tweet for. Everything.
Yeah. It worries me that every time he tweets something. Obviously, how many, it's now a countdown clock, everything he says, to finding out he's doing anything he complains about along the way. And it worries me when, and that's probably the best indicator, by the way, of the seriousness and depth of the Trump-Russia collusion. The best indicator we have that is all true is that there's now a body of Trump tweets saying it isn't. That's how we know. That this is the way it all works. In a couple of years, it'll be obvious. But I think if the timeline is shrinking, we're in real trouble. Let's see. What other things have we to discuss? By the way, a report from Justice. Nobody hears the wood chipper. So that's good news.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
It's a little distracting on my end.
Yeah, I'll bet. Well, they've got to work on things like that. American innovators, we need wood chipper silencers. Can we work on something like that?
That's just sort of horrifying.
Right. Well, so's the lifting the ban on sales of gun silencers, and they seem to want that. So
yeah,
it shouldn't trouble anybody. There's a lot we need our American inventors working on. Let's see. I'm scrolling through here. Anything else that you have on your plate or in mind, or maybe something someone else is covering?
On my mind a lot has been our national flood insurance policy, but I don't think that's something that's going to be resolved in the next month, though it should be. The extent to which this is a man-made disaster really can't be overstated. I was looking at a map somebody tweeted out of the permeability of Houston's surfaces and how that's changed in the past decade and a half. And the fact that there really is pavement, houses, roads, everything over this sort of wetland means that this is just going to keep happening to Houston as long as they keep letting developers reign as they have for the past decades. This is a zoning decision. This is a political decision. This is a man-made disaster. The rain would have come. Climate change, of course, is a man-made disaster as well. But this flooding was inevitable, looking at how Houston has developed in the past few decades.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So
and how the National Flood Insurance Program has assisted in that by continuing to give basically affordable insurance rates to people building on the floodplain because of lobbying pressure from developers in large part.
I got you. So, I mean, essentially, what you would otherwise look at and say, this is a terrible insurance bet here. We
cannot insure this because, look, it's going to flood.
But that
they tried doing that. There was a great deal of pressure from the real estate and development industries primarily, not entirely, to reverse policy in 2014 in that reauthorization of the program.
Now I keep seeing hints also that that Trump took some further steps, that there was some late Obama era regulatory reversal involved as well. And is that something different or on top of?
It's different. It's related. Okay. That was to ensure that stuff that was getting federal money, infrastructure building that was getting federal money, would be built to withstand climate change.
Ah, okay. And since he doesn't believe in that,
one's gone.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That one we wouldn't have seen any effect on the ground quite yet, but it's just that has to do with the fact, I guess, that all of our various storms intensifying and the frequency with which we keep having 100, 200, 500-year storms. And we're puzzling about why that keeps happening in the last 10 to 12 years, which is a lower number, by the way, than 100 or 500.
Yes.
But Trump's only reaction to that so far has been, wow, can you believe it? I have the biggest storms. As though that were a bragging point. And I guess the fact that not everyone in Houston has drowned is like lower the bar success story for Trump. We had a 500-year flood, and there's still a Houston. Aren't I great?
I think that's going to be his takeaway from this storm.
I guess so. And I see he's going back, it said, on Saturday, which seems incredible because that's a golfing day. But that's what's said to be the case. He's made his one trip down there. Melania brought different pairs of shoes for that trip. And, I don't know. And Trump had his mini rally as well.
He's going to want to have another rally.
You think? Will he do that in Texas somewhere? Or will he?
I don't know if anybody's capable of not letting him do that. I think that he did have some response to all of the reporting that he was making this storm all about him and that he had yet to say anything about the victims.
Yes.
Because he did tweet out this morning a sort of, oh yeah, the poor people tweet.
Ow. Okay.
Before he again tweeted about the fake news and how mean they are to him when all he wants to do is MAGA.
Okay. Did he, wondering whether either somebody on staff tweeted for him or they just put that on his agenda, or maybe Fox and Friends said something about it and so he thought he should tweet about it. I guess there's that. I read today that there's a lot of things he's left out. And of course, a lot of things he's made sure to include, like product placement for the hats that he sells.
Yes.
That's, we won't have any indication on whether that has worked and whether sales have increased on the USA hats, or whether or not the FLOTUS hat will be available online. No word yet on whether Melania was modeling a future product or whether that's simply a one of a kind, or maybe something she bedazzled all by herself. I don't know.
It was more nauseating than the shoes, I thought, but
you think?
That's me.
Yeah, I thought the shoes were pretty incredible. Although there was some possibility that she was balance trolling him on the way to the helicopter. Like, look what I can do. And I see you in your Frankenstein boots can hardly walk. But anyway, I don't know.
I like that idea.
I hope so. I'd like to think she's cleverer than he is, but I don't know. It's sometimes hard to believe. But at least
she did marry him after all.
Yeah, I mean, that did happen. So it's not a super genius, but whatever. She's, not having trouble making the rent anyhow. Oh, anyway, let's see. Other items up for grabs in the coming day. You know what the assignment desk looks like there at Daily Kos?
Well, we've got Gabe keeping track of Arpaio, and I haven't read it yet, but saw this morning that there's a very interesting and possibly very real legal challenge to the pardon.
Okay. Do you know where that's coming from?
Let's see. It is... No, not yet.
Okay. Well, we'll I'm sure it will be a topic of discussion, probably something we can bring up on tomorrow's show. I know I have seen a lot of legal scholars speculating on whether or not this falls into a sort of prohibited category. The prohibition itself doesn't actually exist anywhere. It's just based, as I understand it, largely on the Constitutional Convention's debates on the pardon power, and that there was some concession even by the strong Federalists that there ought to be some theoretical limits on the pardon power, and that surely a president would never endanger himself by pardoning someone that could connect him to a crime of any sort. But
okay, I found the story, and this is interesting.
Yes.
It's actually the court. It's the judge.
Oh, that is interesting.
The Arizona Republic reports that District Court Judge Susan Bolton canceled former Sheriff Joe Arpaio's upcoming sentencing hearing for his criminal contempt of court conviction, not to file motions that were pending before his recent presidential pardon. However, Bolton on Tuesday stopped short of throwing out the conviction based solely on Arpaio's request. He had requested she throw it out because he got the presidential pardon.
Right, doesn't work.
Instead, she ordered Arpaio and the U.S. Department of Justice, which is prosecuting the case, to file briefs on why she should or shouldn't grant Arpaio's request.
Okay. I think
so. She's not taking Trump's pardon at face value.
I'm not certain exactly. Well, I'll have to examine this, but I know that Arpaio made this request that his conviction be thrown out, and I don't think that really has anything to do with the pardon. And of course, traditionally, again, under normal circumstances, a pardon is simply, there's no punishment involved federally anyway from this point forward, but it always... normal pardon process includes an acknowledgement of guilt usually. And of course, those who have been speaking about pardon and pardon theory obviously have pointed out, well, there's nothing to pardon if you're not guilty. So that's just not part of it. And it's never part of it that your record is expunged either. Although I guess that's something that the clemency power could possibly reach into. I don't know. But it looks like there's two different kinds of challenges. The one that Arpaio has sort of made up for himself, like now that I don't have to go to jail, that must mean I'm actually not guilty, even though I was convicted by a court. So can you throw out the conviction?
Right.
And that's not really like the way things work. And that's what seems to be going on here. And then there are some legal scholars saying that this is the sort of pardon that is outside of the ones contemplated as legal and constitutional by the founders. Both are a little shaky, but you might as well have the fight because there's more of these coming.
Right. And fighting these is important to try to curtail Trump a little bit when it comes to the Russia stuff.
Yes. And a lot of people have theorized that this is sort of a test run for, if I can get people to swallow this Arpaio pardon and the circumstances surrounding it, then surely this is a good indicator of what sort of backlash we're going to find when I start pardoning people who could otherwise turn state's evidence against me, and then they won't have any reason to do so, and I'll be safe and I'll be able to finish my term unless I drop
Personally,
dead.
I think it was more the racism that was behind the Arpaio pardon.
Yeah, I think that's
and the
probably
conviction that
easier.
he's just going to keep on terrorizing people of color.
Yeah.
But, he may have been looking ahead.
True. And now, of course, the rumors, and this is about the 15th time there's been such rumors, that Arpaio will run for Senate. I don't know whether he's really got the mechanism behind him to do that, but
he's 85?
yeah, he's quite elderly, and so, but yeah, we've had some elderly senators.
We do indeed.
It's
currently have some elderly senators.
Right. Not exactly a graveyard, the Senate. It's a little closer to maybe, I don't know what, zombie zone, but they keep walking around in the Senate. Yeah. It's a good place to hang around till you're 99. They got a doctor right there for free, even though it's socialism. But, just again, demonstrating the power of the socialist model, I guess. If it wasn't for that, would we really have this many 99-year-old senators? I don't think so. So, once again, the best healthcare system in the world, as long as you are one of 100 people who have access to it. Okay, well, it's a dire enough picture, I think, for to carry us through the rest of the week till your next visit. Unless there's any other
I hope
disaster.
so, and hopefully then we won't be all echoey.
Right. I hope not. This is a Russian eavesdropping tactic. Maybe that's what it is. They're listening to the show. Russia, if you're listening, you can do this without having us echo. Just download the podcast. It's free. It's publicly available. You don't have to do this. But they never
it's the echo that I'm hearing of me that's distracting me right now.
Right.
I'm sorry if this has been a disjointed show for anybody, but I'm hearing me split second after I say something, come back, and that's distracting.
Yes. Have you tried this? Try saying today that you consider yourself the luckiest person on the face of the earth. Have you tried the Lou Gehrig speech? Because that works. It's a great thing to do with the echo. Well, the good news is it was entirely coherent on our end. So okay. You soldiered through beautifully. Thanks very much for enduring the technical difficulties and for coming back after all these weeks off. Oh, by the way, eclipse. What was it like where you were?
It was fantastic.
Did you get total eclipse or near total?
Yeah, I went camping with friends.
Oh, excellent.
And yeah.
Wow.
Up the mountains.
Good for you.
No distractions, no lights around, no nothing.
Ooh.
It was very cool.
Yeah, and I'm sure the night before, dark skies for stargazing and the like. Oh, terrific. Well, I'm going there next time, even if the eclipse isn't.
No, it's not, but
right.
We can go camping in the mountains.
Okay. Yeah.
Fun.
It sounds like a good time. I got some Boy Scouts who can help get us some good food cooked and do all the tent stuff. That's so annoying. But, yeah, I'd like to be able to do that sometime. One of them working on the astronomy badge. So we've been seeking out dark skies. And then, of course, we had the eclipse, and we went down to Charleston. Very nice, cloudy skies, but at least we did get to see the actual totality briefly. So good to know that you got it too. Yep. And everyone was enjoying that. Thanks so much for coming back. We'll try and fix things so as not to distract you next time around. Appreciate it, though. Thanks for sticking with us.
You are most welcome. Talk to you next week.
Take care, Joan. Joan McCarter, our senior political writer, twice over at the Daily Kos. I apologize once again for the technical difficulties. If you heard them at home, if you heard them on the podcast, let us know, because that would be an additional problem on top of all the ones we've had so far. But I'm hopeful that the podcast comes through cleanly. I thought we had made some progress on the echo, but we'll work it out. We have a team of experts all equally baffled about this, but the point is that we're all working on the same problem, being baffled together, and that's what really matters in today's world. It's just not normal. I don't know what else to tell you. All right. I think we have come pretty close to the end of the show. Time for us to shortly play our outro music and update you on all of the things that the guys on the after show will bring you up to date on, things we have missed along the way. And let's see. I think, it ought to be a big day. Tomorrow and Friday, rounding things up. Give you a brief preview, if I can, on what we have in pocket anyway, and unless there are some major distractions and huge disasters between now and Friday, and there's always every chance that there will be, although they like to save the really huge ones for Friday afternoon. There's nothing we can do about those. But heading into the weekend to make you a smarter person for your weekend conversation, let's see. We've got some interesting info to share on how to spot a real live Russian bot, although we can spot American bots the very same way, I would think. But some information from a write-up over at Medium that'll help you spot it when you see it. And here's a weird story, too. Maybe we can find time to cram this one in, about a splinter Michigan militia group. They're back in the news, the old Michigan militia, taking over a local gun club in the state and pushing out the normal-ish gun nuts in favor of their own brand of completely not normal-ish gun nuts, and the tensions that raises inside the gun nut community. And that's distinct from the gun-owning community. So lots to monitor on every level. Really plenty to bring up. Okay, let's see. What about today? Let's live for today just for a moment and let you know what's coming up on the after show once Wink and Justice take over the microphones right after this show. A white Georgia state representative threatened a black former state representative with lynching. Yes, actual lynching, when she expressed support for removing Confederate monuments. They really are touchy. That's the trigger for white Southern racists, I guess. Education Secretary, believe it or not, Betsy DeVos won't be visiting any public schools on her 2-day visit to Florida, but she will tour a religious charter school, a religious private school, and a religious voucher school. And the Finnish Defense Ministry says Trump's announcement that Finland will be buying, quote, a large number of F-18 fighter jets from Boeing is a lie. Could you guess?
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
How about the last half of today's after show? They'll be visiting with Angela Marks, a.k.a. Angie in Washington State, for those of you who know her from Twitter, for a political and world news roundup that is the epitome of fire and fury such as the world has never seen before. I like it. Thanks very much. Justice, you're up next.